What is fame? Welcome to Philosopher's Corner. I'm John. What is fame? The standard definition of fame is someone who's well known. I think we're all familiar with that one. But what is entailed in that, and what does it mean to be well known? People have been famous probably since hunter-gatherer times. Probably since the first time that somebody became particularly valuable to a tribe of humans, someone became famous. In the modern era, fame has turned into a manufacturable process. There are systems in place in which someone can be inserted and then they can become well known, where they can become well known and thus famous. And in the modern day, there's a lot of critique of that. There's a lot of like what people call, empty famous people and whatnot. But going back in a culturally anthropological sort of way, how did fame come about as an evolutionary process? Well, if we go back and we go back to pre-civilization and we go back to hunter-gathering tribes and whatnot, we can likely figure out that the first sets of famous people were people who had particularly useful skills to keep the tribe going. And as a result of those people's particularly useful skills for survival, people around them, through a sense of self-survival, place that person in a part of their mind and part of their brain that assigned them a value of importance and an awareness of their importance to their own survival. And at a certain point, that person's utility became so universally recognized within the tribe that many, many people, as a ratio to the amount of people within the population, became so high that essentially everyone knew who that person was based on their utility, based on the importance of that person in individual survival and survival of the group. Now, the nature of that utility doesn't really matter, but based on the type of utility and based on the level of importance in terms of the survival structure, the place that that famous person held in the tribal mind placed them in a certain part of the hierarchy, of the social hierarchy. And that would seem to set the stage for primitive social hierarchies. Fame being a necessary attribute for the establishment of a proper utilitarian social hierarchy. And a mechanism for which leadership can evolve, artisans can evolve, occupations can be evolved. And generally speaking, people's roles in the society could evolve based on the knowledge of these important people, important in relation to survival. And in that way, fame, being well known, was actually fundamental to the survival of the group, because you knew who could do what that was important. And in terms of the individual who was well known, who was famous, It was important for them, because if that person had important skills that were necessary for the survival of the group or survival of selves or preservation of individuals or whatever the skill sets they brought, those skills could only be useful for the group if other people knew about them. If they had a tribe that was starving, and they knew one guy, and they had one guy who knew how to get all the food, but nobody knew who that guy was, and they didn't know that he knew how to get all the food, they could all starve to death needlessly, all because they couldn't decide who that guy was. And in that way, we can see how when a person becomes famous, when they become well known, other factors kick in. So that's the utilitarian side of fame. Just everybody knows a person who can do the thing they need, whatever that thing is. And it works both ways, because it makes the person who's famous, that has the skills, it employs them in the society in the way that optimizes use for both parties, and it makes the group benefit from that person's skill set. Now, that's the ground level. Now, as we take it further and higher up, when that person becomes famous, they now occupy a part of the person's mind and the group's mind based on that utility that they provide. Well, now it's philosophical, because now that person exists in the mind as an abstract. It's not that you're always seeing the person physically saying, oh, that's the person. Now they occupy a part of the mind in the abstract, which means now that a group mind is forming. So even in a hunter-gatherer tribal setting, now because people know about this one person and they know they need to rely on them, and they're occupying a place in the mind in the abstract and in the social hierarchy that is emerging, that allows for the formation of a structured consciousness to emerge from the group in a utilitarian manner. So now the famous person is not only providing a physical utility and known for that, but now, apart from that person's physical self, their abstract self, the theoretical self, is now serving another utility to the group in helping establish this consciousness for the group, in which that figure occupies a position. And so now as the group consciousness emerges, and these different famous people are in there, whether they're leaders or utility people or whatever it is, that becomes timeless from the group. And now it feeds into the long-term security of the group, because now as they move forward, they have a template for not only the physical level of survival, but now they have a template of which to expect people to occupy the mind and the group consciousness, which now become needs. Because as we've studied, human needs go beyond just the physical. They do go into the intellectual, the spiritual, the emotional, all these things. So now the famous person is serving utilitarian needs on two levels, on the physical level and on the mental group consciousness level, and catalyzing a form of group consciousness. And when we say tribal identity or group identity or communities, we are talking both a group of people who have come together to meet physical on-the-ground needs, and a group that has now formed an identity, which is an abstract thing. And when we say that they formed an identity, really what we're saying is that a group consciousness that has become self-aware of the group itself has emerged. So group self-awareness emerges. And arguably, that's the highest function that fame can serve in terms of an individual being famous in the group, is that now that their abstract version of themselves can serve to catalyze group consciousness and create a template for group identity. And then as you move forward through time, the on the ground changes can kind of be whatever. Because let's say it's the hunter-gatherer group and they have famous leaders that they all trust. And let's even say that they've gone through many generations of that, where the initial formation of that group consciousness based on some famous person in their group led to the group having a tradition of now knowing that they have a group identity and that they need people in these positions, and then they look for them to fulfill these positions. And as they move forward in time, let's say they're 10 generations of hunter-gatherers down the line, and they've have developed these positions into sort of codified areas of leadership or jobs or whatever, then at a certain point they say, oh, well, now we're confident enough to pick this area and stop hunting gathering and, create a settlement and establish ourselves in a semi-permanent location, because they had gone through and developed the group identity. And then philosophically we can say, well, maybe that was the point of them going through nature, maybe that was the point of them hunting gathering, was to evolve from individuals trying to survive to groups trying to survive to groups who are surviving, and now they emerge with a group identity catalyzed by famous people, and then now they can settle down and continue to live in a more stable situation. Now, once they've established the group consciousness and catalyzed it, what else is there to say about fame? Well, we know that with, quantum mechanics, when you put your attention on something, it's very powerful. And so now famous people in that setup, once they've evolved into an established, stable settlement, and fame and having people exist in the abstract mind and the group consciousness is an accepted thing, where people they don't necessarily have to go to the leader physically anymore. Oh, we don't need to go, let's go see the king. Well, let's just think about what would he say, right? And you go in the abstract, and then they draw on that, or they draw on past examples from what the person did. Now you have even more efficiency in the group, and you have energy distribution, and you, in a way, have made the famous person a mental portal into the accessibility of the group consciousness and beyond. And then when you combine that with the effects of attention in terms of the quantum activation of attention, of human attention, now you're giving the group the ability to group manifest. You're giving the group the ability to consciously project using one or more of their famous people into the group consciousness to manifest whatever it is they think they're manifesting. But it does give them a portal into and an access to consciousness. Now, when we fast forward to present day, obviously, like I said earlier, that you can manufacture fame that does not have utility. You can manufacture fame as just a form of marketing or manipulation or whatever. But when that individual has been manufactured, or the individual has come up through proper utility, they now have access to the consciousness, and they can influence the consciousness. They can catalyze the consciousness. They can transform it. They can expand it. They can do all sorts of things. They can instill new values in it. They can bring change. They can keep a tradition, whatever. They can do whatever. It's kind of unlimited. But that seems to be the chief utility of fame is that it gives one person the ability to be very useful to the group, and it gives the group the ability to access the consciousness via the famous person. And the famous person can use their position to draw attention to different areas of the consciousness as their group sees fit or as they see fit. Excuse me. So it becomes a sort of dance. So, all in all, I think that's a decent coverage of fame in general and what it can provide, which is it can catalyze a group consciousness and group identity emerging. That's what we see with like a lot of artists. A solo artist comes out, they do their thing, people get into their art, and they go, "Oh, that's what this person's about. I'm about that," and then a group forms. And then all of a sudden, the group has an identity based around the art of that person, or it could be just something super utilitarian. This doctor in this town, he's the best doctor in town. He can save lives. He saves a bunch of lives. Everybody realizes this guy's a great healer. All of a sudden, that doctor's famous, and the group needs him. And you go on and on down the line. It could be there's a mechanic in town. He's the best mechanic in town. Everybody knows it. There's a woman. She's the best dog walker in town, and all the dogs love her. And then, also fame. It cuts across all. It goes more than just the human realm. It goes for any group that can recognize and keep in their mind a particular person. And fame's not limited to people, of course. There's famous animals, there's famous trees, there's famous plants, there's famous planets. Like anything can be famous. It's just a matter of how much group attention goes onto the particular object or being, which ultimately ends up, when you drill down into any of it, ends up being at the core of any of those things is a consciousness, a piece of consciousness. And so once again, we're back to the fact that when something becomes famous, their elevated utility really is access to consciousness. It could be a famous tree, right? You go, "Oh, we're going to go pray to this tree now." Well, why are you praying to the famous tree? Well, because at the core of it, there's belief that it gives you access to a certain portion of the consciousness. So to kind of summarize, yeah, fame is born from real utility. It's good for it can be good for the individual and the group, and it can give people access to the consciousness. So, fame. Well, I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for spending some time here at Philosopher's Corner, and have fun.